Hello and welcome to Run Testers. My name's Nick and we've got something a little bit different today. We're going to be talking about the Nike Vaporfly, comparing the different models from the 4% all the way through to the next percent 2. Now it's not going to be a direct versus and recommend which one to buy because you can only really get hold of the next percent 2 these days, but I'm going to talk through, take a little trip down memory lane, talk about the different versions, how we use them, which we have the fondest memories of and which we think performs the best. I've also gone out today and done a track workout using the 4% Flyknit, the next percent and the next percent 2 to compare them to see how much has really changed in the past 3 models of the shoe. So yeah, it's a great option I think for people to chime in on, so dive into the comments. Which Vaporfly do you have the best memories of? Which do you like the most? Do you think the shoe keeps improving, or did you prefer an earlier version? So there are a couple of key elements to the shoe that has stayed the same throughout the Vaporfly, from the first model through to the latest model, which is big stack of ZoomX cushioning, Nike's PEBA based foam, very soft, very springy, the foam that a lot of brands are now trying to replicate in their shoes, with a full length carbon plate running through the midsole. Other key features basically being a lightweight upper, though the upper material has changed a lot through the generations, and a very stripped back outsole, again to keep the shoe nice and light. So the original 4% started with a mesh upper. I never had the baby blue version, unfortunately, the classic Vaporfly look, but I did get hold of this one, and then after a while it swapped to a Flyknit upper on this one here. The stack was a little bit lower on this shoe compared to later versions. I think it's listed somewhere between like 31 and 33 millimeters, but it's never exactly been nailed down. And then the drop was higher than the later versions. You get 11 millimeter drop on the original Vaporfly 4%, which then drops to 8% on the next percent. And then the 4% had a slightly different outsole design to later editions. You had good forefoot coverage. I'll show you on the Flyknit version because that old 4% was very beaten up. So you had the nice forefoot coverage and then just quite minimal coverage around the heel there, a fair bit of exposed foam that did get chewed up a fair bit. So one of the changes on the next percent was to change the outsole design. You've got better forefoot grip in particular, and then these 2 strips of rubber in the back that protect the foam if you're heel striking. Switched to a vapor weave upper on the next percent, the original next percent. Offset laces came into the equation, which continues to be quite fun. And then the midsole dropped to an 8mm drop, and they added more ZoomX into the shoe. So you had a higher stack overall, you had a lower drop, you had to create a slightly more balanced, a stable ride, especially on wet courses. And then the other changes were things like this upper, which soaks in a bit less water than the Flyknit, and the outsole, which again designed to take corners at speed, that kind of thing, provide better grip in inclement weather. And then with the next percent 2, not a lot changed on paper anyway. Like Nike said, basically the change was this mesh upper that had a slightly stiffer feel, had a toe box where the material was lifted off your toes a bit more because the vapor weave would sag onto them a little bit, and then they added a bit more padding to the tongue, things like that. So the underfoot feel was meant to be the same and the outsole was meant to be the same. A lot of people have said that they find the Vaporfly next percent 2 firmer than the next percent 1, and in particular the top layer of foam above the plate seems to be slightly firmer to the touch than the top layer of foam on the next percent. I struggle with this idea. I'm still not entirely sure because generally I'm testing a newer next percent 2, so maybe it feels a bit firmer because it's fresh out the box. But yeah, I do find it a little bit firmer, and I did on the track session today. And the other small thing to note, I think throughout the ages of the shoe, I think the shoe's getting heavier, which is interesting. Not very much. It's still one of the lightest carbon plate shoes on the market, but the next percent 2 is now around kind of 207 grams in my UK size 9, whereas the 4% were under 200 grams, and the original next percent was only slightly over. So little nudges up in weight, but I think maybe people are starting to realise that actually having a bit of extra weight is a trade-off you're happy to make to get a bit more cushioning, a bit more bounce into the shoe, maybe even a slightly better outsole for gripping. So still one of the lighter shoes in the market, but I do think it's interesting that they've got a little bit heavier over time instead of the other way. So kicking off this trip down my memories of the Vaporfly, we'll start with the 4%, which was one of the most exciting days of my running life when I got hold of this. Got really lucky. Found it at a Nike outlet store in North London. I went in, it's slightly too big for me, this shoe, but it was worth getting because it was the only one I could get hold of. Happened to go in on Black Friday, so I got 80 quid knocked off the price. And also the guy at the checkout told me that it was a great gym shoe, so clearly they had no idea what they had knocking around in the back of the store there. But yeah, very excited. I remember I got kicked off the bus early on the way home, was walking home in the rain, big smile on my face, got the shoe about 2 weeks before the Valencia Marathon, used it for a workout the next day, and just noticed immediately how much of a difference it made. So I was doing a very very similar workout to one I'd done the week before, a 10-mile workout, and I'd done it the week before in the Adidas Boston, which was, planned to be my marathon shoe. It was a really good shoe, still is a really good shoe, but heart rate was lower. Everything just felt easier and smoother in the shoe. Like, it really was a huge leap forward on the shoes available at the time, and kind of set in motion this insane carbon revolution we've seen since then. So went to Valencia, ran a 2:38 in the shoe. It was a huge PB, probably the most I've ever enjoyed a marathon. Really paced it well, nice progression run, and was using a carbon super shoe for the first time. And it was also my first marathon with a proper coach, the first time I'd fueled really well, so everything came together in just a huge 15-minute PB. So very fond memories of that shoe. Same is true of the 4%, which I think basically had a snugger fit, but otherwise had quite a similar feel underfoot, I think. Not too much change with the shoe, but I do think the Flyknit upper gripped the foot a bit well and made it feel almost a little bit more nimble for me. I've used it in the wet today, so it is a bit soaking, and that does add a bit of weight, but in general, really enjoyed using the shoe. Used it for the London Marathon, ran a PB there as well in the shoe, ran a 2:33 in it then, and this was still the period when the Vaporfly was completely untouched basically by any other brand. The 4% Flyknit was a bit more available than the 4% had been, so lots of people had them, starting to crop up at lots of races, and everyone I think has quite fond memories of the Flyknit version of the shoe. It's probably maybe the first one that most people got hold of, and this is the one I constantly see referenced, actually I wish I could find a pair of these because they had the higher drop and I want to use these more for upcoming marathons, and I did find it very hard when the Vaporfly Next Percent came out to really accept the idea that it was a better shoe than the 4%. I've actually found an old review I wrote at the time, and I just said, well, Next Percent, it's a bit more stable, might be better on wet courses, but I don't think you're getting better performance. And that was, I'd done some workouts using both shoes and that kind of thing, but when I did then take the Next Percent to kind of full half marathon and marathon distance, it did become a bit clearer that this was leap forward, actually a bigger one than I maybe remember at the time. This actually, I think, the Next Percent really set the template for other brands to follow. You've got the higher stack, slightly lower drop. Most of these carbon shoes are around 8mm, some are even lower these days, and you get just a slightly more stable feel, but also the extra propulsion from the added Zoom X in this shoe compared to the 4%. It really started to take things in a slightly more wild direction. I think the Vaporfly now looks quite normal compared to some of the shoes on the market, but when this came out, I thought this is ridiculous. This is going mad. Whereas I think the 4% did look quite a normal shoe, even at the time. So a marathon I ran in this shoe was a Loch Ness Marathon, which was not my fastest marathon, something I did more as a really enjoyable trip because it was shortly after the birth of my daughter, but I think it might be one of my best marathons. I had a really great day, ran 2:36 or second on the day, and I was using this shoe thinking, I think it's good, but the 4% is just as good, and it really did tell in the later stages of the marathon, a bit more kind of cushioning underfoot, the extra spring, and I actually find it almost tips you forward a bit better despite the fact it's got a lower drop than the 4%. So Next Percent really was a very good shoe, and probably better than I thought it was when it first came out. It was very hard to get over the idea that anything could really be better than the 4%, especially as they'd increased the price. And then the Next Percent 2 came out, and very similar lines, I do think. First few runs in this, I didn't really notice any difference. The upper was slightly different. I think I get a bit more rubbing at the heel on this new upper. And actually, in general, I think it's improvement in the toe box, but I'm not sure it's a huge improvement at the back of the shoe, so I have to heel lock this one. But found the ride very similar. Today, using it in tandem with the Vaporfly Next Percent, I do think this one is a bit firmer, but this is a very new Next Percent too. I've used it for the marathon in Berlin, which was my PB marathon, ran 2:28 in this shoe. And one of the reasons I did use it was because I have appreciated this is a slightly firmer shoe now compared to the rest of the market. So now the Vaporfly 2's come out, big change in the kind of the scene compared to when the 4% was coming out. Every brand has a carbon shoe, lots of them positioning them in different ways. You've got slightly softer marathon focused shoes, versatile shoes, and the Vaporfly, even Nike kind of positions it more a short distance. I think they've rode that back a bit because they were trying to make room for the Alphafly, and actually I think in general the line has got firmer over time from the 4% to the Next Percent, and then maybe very slightly to the Next Percent too, and maybe that's part of the positioning of it as an accompaniment to the Alphafly, if you want to have both, with the Alphafly being the softer shoe for the full marathon. But it still does everything really well. It still is very soft, very explosive, very fast, and very hard to top. It'll be interesting to see where Nike takes the line in the future. So that's a little trip down memory lane. Now we're going to head to the track where I used all of these shoes today. That's why all these shoes are still quite wet in my hand. Very good test actually of the way that Nike's claimed to make the uppers more drainable over time today, and see how they felt. Just down at the glorious Lee Valley track, which is absolutely soaking today. Here for a fun workout doing 12 times 1k, testing 3 different generations of Vaporfly shoes. Going to use the original 4%, actually the Flyknit version, not the original. 4% Flyknit for the first 4 reps, then the Next Percent 1 for the next 4 reps, and then the Next Percent 2 for the final 4 reps. Plan is to run alternating reps at 3:15 and 3:30 with 200 meters jog recovery. So should be fun. Very wet. Alright, post-track chat. I was going to do this at the track, but it really was very wet and I was very cold, and I thought it was a bad idea to do a bit more filming there, so I thought I'd come home, have a bit more of a think, and do it afterwards. So honestly, that was such a fun day. In general, because I'm starting to come back into fitness after being a bit ill, and really enjoyed the session. Really ran it very well today, felt nice and controlled in all the reps, but also the shoes are just so much fun to use. It was really, really fun to pull the 4% and the next percent back on in particular. So I was running the reps, I was doing groups of 4 basically in each shoe, and it was alternating pace of a 315k rep and then a 330k rep with 200 meters jog recovery in just over a minute, or a bit longer when I was doing the shoe changes. So, when I'm on it, in theory, 315 is around my 10k pace and 330 is around marathon pace. So that's kind of how it broke down. So it was almost, faster than my threshold pace and then slower than my threshold pace for the reps. And all of them felt brilliant. I think it's really interesting to talk about the 4% in this context, just running in it, how much the market has changed since this shoe came out, and then running in it back to back with those shoes today, and the way it performed is like, really, if this had still been the only shoe on the market, we'd all be very happy. It's still that good, and I do think the shoes have improved from lots of brands over time a little bit, but it just goes to show, with the regulations in place now, almost perfect, this shoe, and you're just kind of fiddling around the margins from there. You consider the leap from, the racing shoes we were using before to the 4%, it was so big, and then just getting increments. I do think the next percent is a better shoe, and like I say, it was a slightly bigger jump than I thought at the time. I thought it was basically exactly the same, but this still stands up as a fantastic shoe, just cruising through the reps today, and it's softer than the other two shoes. Interestingly as well, when I was looking at some of the Garmin stats after the session, my lowest ground contact time on any of the reps was in the 4%. Now, there was the shoe I used first in the session, so maybe I was just a bit fresher and picking up my feet a bit better. But yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. I wasn't really under pressure or struggling to hit the pace at any point, but maybe I just got into slightly more of a smoother, lazier rhythm maybe with the later shoes, and hitting the paces where I was picking up my feet a bit faster in the 4%, but could testify the fact it's a slightly nimbler, narrower, lighter shoe in general. Then when I swapped on to the next percent, a couple of things I noticed straight away is a slightly firmer shoe, I think, for me as a heel striker than the 4%, but also it felt like it was tipping me forward a bit better, despite the fact it's got a lower drop. Don't know if it's just the extra cushioning and maybe the plate sits a bit higher and there's more room to scoop and just get you rolling forward a bit more than the 4%, but yeah, it did feel fantastic to put it on. It did feel that little bit more aggressive, tippy forward, and fast, even than the 4%, which was obviously very fast indeed. So yeah, and it really was raining very hard, and I do think this upper works quite well. I know they changed it back to the mesh from the new one, but yeah, the water wasn't really getting in. It was only over the case of, like I say, 4 reps. So if you over the course of a marathon, maybe it wouldn't be ideal. But the 4% Flyknit obviously does love soaking up a bit of water. So definitely did notice a change in feel with this shoe. And then going on to the next percent 2, I again noticed a change in feel. I certainly did feel a bit firmer today. Like I say, my next percent ones have done lots and lots of miles. They've taken a bit of a beating. I think that's softened them up a little bit. But yeah, this does feel a slightly firmer shoe. And again, even more aggressive, slightly more slappy and snappy and moving me through my foot strike quicker and a bit louder actually on the run than the next percent one. Again, I did notice a bit more of a difference than I kind of remembered when I was originally testing the two shoes, but not that much. I will say that. It probably maybe slightly more than I remember, but at the end of the day, the feel was the Vaporfly. Very similar kind of amount of tip forward, bounce from that Zoom X foam, nice amount of control. The upper didn't really make a difference today. Over short reps like that, doesn't really notice a difference. I think I get a bit more pressure on the top of my foot from this shoe because of the way I have to heel lock it really tightly. And also when I had the chip in at Berlin, it was one of those lace chips and it really dug into my foot. And I think I've still got some kind of bad memories of that because my foot hurts in the exact same place from tightening up this shoe today. So my skin's still a bit bruised from that chip. But yeah, broadly speaking, it was great today. I think it was the fastest shoe. But what I will say is it was very, very similar in performance across the board. And it comes to vibes, which is a very different measurement. I got the best vibes from these two shoes, so many happy memories. But then, my happiest memory of all would be in this shoe where I ran my PB in Berlin recently. But these were so much fun to pull on, and they were a bit softer and a bit more fun. And I think the slightly more aggressive feel of the Vaporfly Next Percent 2 probably makes it a better racer for me in particular, landing at the heel and getting that big kick forward from the maybe slightly firmer feeling of the foam. But when it comes to just pure affection, I think these two might be edging it. Also, I didn't use my original 4%. These are trashed, you can see. They're still very bouncy, but yeah, they're not really shoes to take down the track anymore. But a lot of love for that shoe. The only one I had for a long time, so it got used a lot more than the other ones where I started to review lots of different shoes. But yeah, really fun today to go and use all 3 shoes. If you've got some old Vaporflies, I would recommend going out. But my big takeaway would probably be that as much as I love those older shoes and maybe like them a bit more, I don't think we're losing anything by not having them available anymore. I wouldn't go seeking out old shoes. The Vaporfly Next Percent 2, I think, is the pinnacle of the line. that is yeah, slightly different video, like I say, talking about the Vaporfly through the ages. Let us know your experience of the shoe. When did you kind of first jump on the bandwagon and start using these shoes? Obviously, we've not really talked about the fact that maybe they should have been banned from the start. I'm pretty open to that idea, but they haven't been banned and we've all used them now. So I guess talk about which you think is the best and which have you had the fondest memories of. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time with some more modern carbon shoe reviews probably coming up on the channel soon. Please like, subscribe, ring the little bell, and we'll see you next time.